My name is Emily. I was born when my parents were in their 40s and already had a 13-year-old daughter named Laura. Laura was the pride of the family, and to them she was enough. We never planned to have a second child, my mom often said, not with malice but without hiding the truth either. In moments like that I would stay silent, fully aware that my existence came from the urging of my maternal grandparents. They were the only ones in the family excited about my arrival, having pleaded with my parents to have another granddaughter. But to my parents, I was merely a responsibility they were forced to bear. By the time I was born, Laura was already a teenager absorbed in her own world, hanging out with friends, preparing for SATs, and having endless conversations about college. I can't recall a single time when Laura genuinely paid attention to me. She wasn't mean, but she acted as if I didn't exist. While I played with my dolls alone in the corner of the living room, Laura would lounge on the sofa, engrossed in phone conversations with her friends. Laura, don't forget your SAT books, my mom would remind her, carefully packing them into her bag. Meanwhile, I sat quietly at the dining table with my math homework in front of me, waiting for someone to notice that I also needed help. But no one ever did. My parents quickly established a routine that shaped my entire childhood. Every morning they dropped me off at my grandparents' house before heading to work. "Here's your little one," my dad would say to my grandpa, jingling his keys as if he couldn't wait to hand me over. My grandparents' home became my true refuge. They picked me up from school, helped me with my homework, took me to the park, and always made sure I was well fed. I found myself late at night, my parents would come to get me, often looking tired and slightly irritated by the obligation. "Emily, you're the best thing that ever happened to us," my grandma would whisper as she hugged me tightly. In those moments, I almost forgot what it felt like to be rejected by my parents. At home, however, life was a constant reminder that I was an unnecessary child. When Laura left for college, I hoped, just a little, that my parents might finally pay more attention to me. I was wrong. "Emily, clean the bathroom," my mom called out as soon as I walked through the door after school. All of Laura's old household chores were passed down to me, along with a slew of new ones. I quickly adapted to doing laundry, cleaning, and eventually cooking. When I turned 15, my mom abruptly declared, "You're old enough now. From now on, you'll handle dinner." And that's how I started learning to fend for myself in the kitchen, teaching myself to cook. From simple dishes like spaghetti, to more elaborate meals. All to serve my parents. My life became an endless cycle of responsibilities and indifference. My parents only saw my worth through the chores I completed, and even when I did everything perfectly, they never expressed satisfaction or genuine interest in me. I grew used to being overlooked in my own home, though deep down, I always held on to the hope that one day, they would change. But that day never came. My maternal grandparents, Harold and Margaret, were the guiding light in the otherwise gloomy days of my childhood. Every morning when my parents dropped me off at their house, a wave of relief washed over me. It was the only place where I truly felt loved. "Emily, you're a little angel," Grandma Margaret would often say, gently stroking my hair. She had a way of making me feel special, even when the rest of the world seemed to see me as a burden. Grandpa Harold was the most patient person I've ever known. During afternoons spent working on homework at the dining table, he would sit beside me, carefully guiding me through each number and calculation. "You're doing great," he would say, his eyes sparkling with pride whenever I solved a difficult math problem. To my grandparents, I wasn't the forgotten child. I was the heart of the warm, loving world they had created. When this physical world went away, on weekends they would always take me to the park or the library. Those were rare moments when I experienced true joy, laughing and playing without worrying about the endless chores waiting for me at home. I still remember the time Grandpa Harold took me to a small bakery near their house. "Emily, would you like to try this?" he asked, pointing to a cupcake topped with a swirl of frosting. It was the first time I felt that someone genuinely wanted to make me happy. When they settled on a loaf, Grandma Margaret also taught me how to care for the flowers in her little garden. "See, Emily? Flowers need love and care just like people do," she said, carefully pulling out weeds. Every time I saw the flowers bloom, I felt a sense of peace. As if the wind carried my worries away. My grandparents didn't just give me love, they also taught me invaluable lessons. Emily, life isn't always easy, but you have to learn to stand tall, Grandpa Harold would say during our heart-to-heart talks. They weren't wealthy, but they always saved what they could so I wouldn't lack anything. Grandma Margaret often told me that from the day I was born, they had opened a small savings account for me, just in case Emily ever needs it. I didn't know then how that money would later change my life, but I did know that their love and sacrifices made me feel incredibly fortunate. The years I spent at their house were not only a refuge from my troubled childhood, but also a foundation for the person I would become. While my parents saw me as a responsibility, my grandparents saw me as their pride and joy. They taught me to be strong, grateful, and never to give up, no matter how hard life became. One day, I asked Grandma Margaret why they loved me so much. She simply smiled and replied, "Because you deserve it, Emily. You're a gift that heaven sent to us." Those words etched themselves into my heart and became a source of strength that would help me overcome challenges in the years to come. Whenever I came home from a long day at school and saw their radiant smiles welcoming me, I knew I had found where I truly belonged. It wasn't the house where I was born, but in my grandparents' home I learned what unconditional love really meant. Those memories didn't just help me endure the hardest parts of my childhood, they became a beacon of hope that would guide me through the darkest moments of my life. Everything we teach about love, it's the wind that never ends, and so every one of us deserves an opportunity to manifest those lessons. When I graduated from high school with excellent grades and 3 acceptance letters from top universities, I had hoped that my efforts would finally be recognized. I held the letters in my hands, filled with pride and excitement. This was the moment I had been waiting for, the moment I thought my parents would finally see my worth. But I was wrong. That evening, I placed the 3 letters on the dining table and shared the news with my parents. "I got accepted into NYU, UCLA, and Michigan State," I said, unable to hide my excitement. Their response, however, left me stunned. My mom, not even bothering to look up from her plate, simply said, "That's good news, but we don't have the money to pay for your college." I froze. "But Mom, you paid for Laura's college, and even spent thousands of dollars on her wedding," I protested, my voice trembling. She shrugged, her tone indifferent. "Laura's different. We saw potential in her." The words pierced me like a knife. Everything I had done, all the late night studying and sacrifices to achieve top grades, was dismissed with a cold, simple statement. My dad added, "If you really want to go to college, get a job and take care of yourself. Adults take responsibility for their own lives." I didn't say another word for the rest of the evening. After dinner, I went to my room, tears streaming silently down my face. I couldn't believe that the people who gave me life could be so heartless. The next morning, I gathered the courage to call Grandma Margaret and tell her everything. She listened quietly, and then said, "Emily, come over right now, we need to talk." When I walked through their door, Grandma Margaret was already waiting, her arms wide open to embrace me. "We knew this day would come," she said, her voice warm but firm. I looked at her in confusion. Grandpa Harold emerged from his office holding an old briefcase. "Sweetheart, we've been preparing for this day for a long time," he said, opening the case to reveal a stack of bank. Grandma Margaret explained. "When you were little, we started saving. We knew your parents wouldn't treat you the same as Laura, and we couldn't let you be disadvantaged." Each number on those papers was a testament to their love and foresight. "This money is enough for you to attend any university you choose," Grandpa Harold said, his eyes full of hope. I couldn't hold back my tears. "You did all this for me?" I choked out. "Of course, Emily," Grandma Margaret replied, her eyes shining. "You deserve the best." Thanks to their savings, I decided to attend New York University, where I knew I could pursue my dream of a career in finance. The days leading up to my move were busy, and my grandparents were by my side every step of the way, helping me fill out forms, buy supplies, and get everything ready. My parents barely showed any interest. do whatever you want," my mom said dismissively, when I informed her of my decision. On my first day walking through the university campus, I felt as though a massive weight had been lifted off my shoulders. Every step I took on the brick path leading to the lecture halls was a step away from the shadows of neglect and injustice. I made a promise to myself that I would never waste the sacrifices my grandparents had made for me. I would live a life that would make them proud, because I knew that everything I had achieved was thanks to their unconditional love. My college years at New York University marked a major turning point in my life. Leaving behind a cold, unjust home, I began a new chapter where I could truly be myself. On my first day of class, I carried not only my dreams but also the hopes and love that my grandparents had instilled in me. I reminded myself that I could not afford to let them down. College life wasn't easy, but I loved every moment of it. Every lecture and project was a challenge I embraced with enthusiasm. Late nights spent studying in the library didn't discourage me, instead, they fueled my determination. I frequently called my grandparents to share small classroom victories, and every time, they cheered me on with warm encouragement. "You are our greatest pride, Emily," Grandpa Harold once said during a phone call, his voice filled with pride. The Americano classic was my favorite. Those words became a source of strength, helping me get through even the toughest days. In my sophomore year, I started an internship at a small financial firm. It was my first opportunity to apply what I had learned, and I quickly discovered I had a talent for financial analysis. "Emily, you have a rare gift for logical thinking," my supervisor told me during a midterm evaluation. That compliment reassured me that I was on the right path. By my final year, I had secured an internship at one of the largest financial firms in New York. The job provided not only valuable experience but also important connections. I worked harder than ever, not just to prove myself, but to feel deserving of the sacrifices my grandparents had made for me. When I graduated with honors and received a job offer from the company I had interned with, I knew I had achieved something I once thought impossible. During this time, my relationship with my parents grew increasingly distant. They rarely called to check in, and I didn't feel compelled to reach out either. My sister Laura occasionally sent short messages about her family's financial struggles with her husband James. Each time I read those messages, I felt a cold detachment. The pain that had once haunted me was gone, replaced by an acceptance that the gap between us was inevitable. In contrast, my bond with Grandma Margaret and Grandpa Harold remained as strong as ever. I frequently visited them during school breaks, bringing stories of my work and life. The warm dinners at their home were moments of true belonging. No pressure, no expectations, just pure, sincere love. Grandpa Harold often said, "Seeing you now, I know everything we did was worth it." Those words always brought tears to my eyes, reminding me that they were my true family. My career at the financial firm began to stabilize, and within 3 years I was promoted to project manager. The high salary and generous bonuses allowed me to purchase a small apartment in Manhattan, a dream I had never dared to imagine. On the day I moved in, I invited my grandparents to my housewarming party. Grandpa Harold looked around the apartment and smiled. "Emily, you did it! This is the result of all the hard work you've put in." Standing in my own apartment, seeing the pride in my grandparents' eyes, I knew I had not only overcome my past, but also built a bright future. I made a promise to myself that the love and values my grandparents had taught me would always guide me. They had given me more than just support. They had given me the foundation to thrive, and the belief that I could accomplish anything. The greatest loss of my life occurred one early autumn day when I received a call from the hospital. Grandpa Harold had suffered a severe heart attack and didn't survive. I rushed to the hospital, but it was too late. He had passed away peacefully in his sleep, his face serene as if he were dreaming of something beautiful. I collapsed under the weight of the news. He had always been by my side, the one who taught me how to face life with strength. And now? He was gone. Grandma Margaret was devastated by the loss. After more than 50 years by his side, she seemed to lose much of her will to live. I did my best to support her, but just 2 months later, she too left me forever. It was a time when I felt as if my entire world had crumbled. I had lost the 2 people who loved me most, and showed me what unconditional love truly meant. After the funeral, Their lawyer invited me to his office to read their will. I knew my grandparents wanted to protect me, but I didn't expect that they had left everything to me. The house where I had grown up and a $250,000 savings account were entrusted to me, along with a handwritten letter from Grandpa Harold. In the letter, he wrote, "Emily, you are our greatest pride. What we've left behind is not just material wealth, but our belief that you will continue to live a life of dignity and purpose. Use this to build the future you deserve." I read the letter through tears, feeling the immense love and faith they had placed in me. Meanwhile, my sister Laura's life was falling apart. Her husband James lost his job and couldn't find stable work. Laura's career in marketing hadn't turned out the way she had hoped. With 2 young children and mounting debts, they were forced to move back in with our parents. The house that had once been cold and unwelcoming to me was now overcrowded and chaotic, with 4 additional people. It became a giant undercrowded, a type of depression that lasted into the midst. So, 2 years later, after my sister's recovery, I heard about this through mutual acquaintances, but no one from the family reached out to share their struggles or seek comfort. One day, my parents unexpectedly showed up at my apartment door, looking exhausted and drained. They sat down and began talking about Laura and James's hardships. "They can't afford their rent, and we're running out of money too," my mom said, her eyes filled with hope. "Emily, can you help? Your niece and nephew need a stable home." I sat silently for a long moment, as memories of my cold, neglected childhood flashed through my mind. Finally, I replied, "I'm sorry, but I can't help. Everything I have is thanks to Grandma and Grandpa, and I intend to honor their wishes by using it to build the future they wanted for me." My parents left, visibly disappointed and bitter. Not long after, Laura called me, accusing me of being selfish and heartless, but I knew I had made the right decision. The love my grandparents had given me was something I couldn't betray by handing it over to people who had never valued me. I decided to sell the house my grandparents had left me and use the funds to invest in my own business. I opened a small financial consulting firm focused on helping people like my grandparents, working-class families in need of guidance to manage their finances and secure their futures. Every day at work, I thought of Grandma and Grandpa, of their quiet sacrifices and boundless love. Their legacy became my motivation, driving me to create something meaningful that would endure. Through my efforts, I sought to honor them, not just in memory, but through the lives I helped improve, inspired by the love they had given me. After selling my grandparents' house, I used the money to buy a new home, a place I hoped would be the start of my fully independent life. It was a charming house in the suburbs with a spacious yard and a peaceful atmosphere. I had considered inviting my parents and Laura over to mend our relationship, but before I could do so, something happened that shattered any hope of reconciliation. The moment the change forever started afresh, but when it did, I smiled and nodded at Noah. One evening, while scrolling through social media, I stumbled upon a post from Laura. The words felt like a slap to the face. "Can't wait for the housewarming party this weekend at my parents' gorgeous new home. So grateful I could help make it happen." The post included pictures of the house I had just bought, decorated with balloons and a lavish party setup. I froze, feeling an overwhelming sense of betrayal. At first, I couldn't believe it. I called my mom, trying to stay calm. "Mom, I just saw Laura's post. Are you having a housewarming party at my house?" I asked. There was a brief pause before she responded. "Well, Emily, we just wanted to throw a small gathering. You've been so busy, so we didn't want to bother you," she said softly. But the lie in her words made my blood boil. I drove to the house immediately. As I pulled up, I heard music and laughter coming from inside. I walked through the unlocked front door and was stunned by what I saw. The house I had bought through my hard work was filled with strangers. My dad stood in the center of the living room, cheerfully chatting with a group of guests. "We're so proud of this new home," he announced loudly, "and we have to thank our wonderful daughter Laura for helping with the finances." I stepped further into the room and his voice faltered when he saw me. All eyes turned toward me. "Emily," my dad tried to compose himself, but I had reached my breaking point. I think there's been a misunderstanding, I said firmly, my voice cutting through the room. This house is mine. I bought it with my own money. Neither Laura nor anyone else had any part in that. The room fell into an awkward silence. Laura's face flushed as she stared at the floor, and my mom avoided eye contact. Emily, we were just trying to have a family gathering, she began, but I didn't let her finish. A family gathering where I wasn't even invited? And you lied, claiming Laura helped buy this house? This is beyond unacceptable. I turned to the guests. Thank you for coming, but this party is over. Please leave my house. The crowd quietly gathered their things and left without a word. My parents and Laura were the last to leave, their expressions a mixture of guilt and resentment. Just before walking out the door, my mom turned to me and said, "You're being incredibly selfish, Emily." I didn't respond. I simply closed the door behind them. That night I sat alone in the empty house, my mind racing with conflicting emotions. I knew I had done the right thing, but the pain of my family's betrayal cut deep. This house had once been a symbol of my success, but now it was a painful reminder of the irreparable rift between me and the people who had given me life. After a sleepless night of reflection, I made a decision. I would sell the house. Not because I was weak, but because I wanted to free myself from the painful memories it now held. I needed a fresh start in a new place, one untainted by the wounds of my family's betrayal. It was time to move forward, leaving the past behind, and building a future free from their shadow. After selling the house, I felt as though a tremendous weight had been lifted from my shoulders. The money from the sale was deposited into my savings account not just as a preparation for the future, but also as a reminder of the independence I had built with my own efforts. I made the difficult decision to cut all contact with my parents and Laura. It wasn't easy, but I knew that maintaining those relationships would only continue to hurt me. Sometimes, letting go is the only way to truly heal. In the days that followed, I focused on my work and personal life. I moved into a smaller but cozy apartment that was entirely my own. This space brought me the peace I had been searching for. Every morning I brewed a cup of coffee, sat by the window overlooking the city, and reminded myself of how far I had come. Overcoming the pain and challenges of my past. Through persistence, I in fact returned myself to okay. In moments of quiet reflection, I often thought about Grandpa Harold and Grandma Margaret. Their guidance and unconditional love continued to be the compass for my decisions. I made a promise to myself that if I ever had children, I would love them equally and unconditionally. They would never feel compared or abandoned as I once did. I wanted to create a family where every member felt valued and cherished. One day, while walking through a nearby park, I saw a mother playing with her two young children. The sight made me smile and brought back fond memories of my time with my grandparents. In that moment, I realized I didn't need a perfect family to become a good parent. What mattered was that I had learned from the mistakes of others, and knew how to give love. As time passed, I gradually built a new life, one that was fuller and more meaningful. My financial consulting business flourished, and I dedicated part of my income to supporting organizations that helped children and struggling families. I believed that the best way to honor my grandparents was to help others who needed a little kindness and support to overcome their hardships. Although I no longer spoke with my parents and Laura, I didn't feel lonely. I surrounded myself with new relationships, friends and colleagues who genuinely valued and supported me. I also learned how to forgive, not to reconcile with those who had hurt me, but to free myself from the burden of pain and anger. Forgiveness didn't mean forgetting, it meant accepting that the past couldn't be changed, but the future could. One morning while journaling, I wrote down a promise to myself. I will become the person I once wished I had in my life. That promise became a driving force, motivating me to continue striving, not only in my career, but also in building a future I could be proud of. I didn't know exactly what the future held, but I knew I was ready for it. I had learned how to love myself, to heal from the wounds of the past, and to build a life founded on love, fairness, and hope. And one day, when I have children, they will not endure the pain I once did. They will grow up surrounded by love, support, and the unwavering belief that they are always worthy. Because that is how I will love them. Just as Harold and Margaret loved me. The takeaway from this story is the importance of love, fairness, and independence. Family wounds can leave deep scars, but they do not define who we are. The sacrifices and unconditional love from the grandparents teach us that true family isn't always about blood relations, it's about the people who love and value us. More importantly, learning to stand on our own, build our lives, and love ourselves is the key to overcoming pain and creating a brighter future. What are your thoughts on this story? What lessons did you take away from it? Don't forget to follow the channel so you won't miss more heartwarming and meaningful stories about family and life. The upcoming stories will make you reflect and inspire you.